Much more now on the Vance-Walz back and forth, specifically the facts behind that controversy. CNN's Sarah Murray has more.
It's a novelty in American political history.
After 9/11, I did what thousands of other young men my age did in that time of soaring patriotism and love of country. I enlisted in the United States Marines.
Two men who enlisted in the military.
For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation.
Now vying for the vice presidency.
It is truly remarkable, and I think it says a lot about the promise of our country.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance didn't see combat action, but both spent years in uniform.
At 17, I joined the Army National Guard.
For Walz, that meant cleaning up after tornadoes, responding to floods, and handling heavy weaponry in an artillery unit also known as...
We're called King of Battle.
Joe Eustace served with Walz in the Minnesota National Guard.
When we served, he was as good a leader as you'd find.
After 9/11, Walz re-enlisted, and both he and Eustace deployed to Europe, leaving their families behind for months to support the U.S. war in Afghanistan. Walz, stationed in Italy, guarded an army base.
We were under the early impression that we would shoot artillery in Afghanistan. As it turned out, we ended up being a European security force.
After we got done, people kind of talked smack about, well, you guys just went on vacation and whatever. Well, I disagree with those characterizations because you don't get to pick where you go.
When Walz returned in 2004, he began weighing a run for office and retirement from the Guard.
At the time, he was a football coach, a teacher, a dad in the Guard. And then you throw running for office in on that? I mean, that's a lot. Instead of serving in the Guard, he wanted to serve in another manner.
While some of Walz's fellow servicemen were surprised by his political ambitions, that wasn't the case for J.D. Vance.
We all knew one day he would run for office. He always did a great job where he was at, but always looked forward to the next thing.
Haney was Vance's officer in charge at a Marine Corps airfield in Cherry Point, North Carolina. Vance served from 2003 to 2007, enlisting as a combat correspondent and, for about 6 months, deploying to Iraq.
Generally, I'd take photos or write short stories about individual Marines or their work.
They go where the action is. In our job of public affairs, if the Marines were sitting at their desks, they weren't doing their jobs.
After his deployment, Vance returned to Cherry Point and served as a media relations officer, parrying press inquiries and escorting media on base, a role usually filled by a more senior Marine.
I struggled a bit at first, allowing some photographers to take photos of a classified aircraft, speaking out of turn at a meeting with senior officers, and I got my ass chewed.
Ultimately, Haney says he thrived, and fellow Marines described him as smart, funny, and responsible. Both Eustace and Haney now standing up for their comrades' service, even though they don't necessarily agree with their politics. As Walz and Vance, but especially Walz, face political attacks over their time in uniform.
However we are characterizing and or downplaying or even denigrating either of these men's service is also sending a signal to those who may have served in similar ways. That should bother all of us.
Sarah Murray joins us now. Does it seem to you that there's a life to this debate over Walz's service, Vance's military service?
Yeah, Anderson, I don't see this going away anytime soon, especially because Vance has come out so hard against Walz and his military record, been very critical about when he decided to retire. And in fact, when the Harris campaign agreed to 3 more debates, but not more beyond that, Vance actually took to Twitter and accused Tim Walz of refusing to deploy again. So I think that shows you the sort of life behind these attacks. And we should note, look, we talked to a number of veterans who are frankly disappointed to see these kind of attacks in the political arena. They think it should be celebrated that there are 2 men who have this kind of enlisted background, enlisted military background. First time, Anderson, in roughly 30 years that 2 men, again, enlisted military veterans, are vying for the vice presidency.
This campaign is about a recognition that, frankly, over the last several years, there's been this kind of perversion that has taken place, I think, which is to suggest that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, when what we know is the real and true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. Anybody who's about beating down other people is a coward.
Now, Misha, all day long you've heard people say, was she calling Trump a coward? That's been the headline. You've seen it all over the place. And it's the idea of not being direct if there is an insult. Will the tenor and the tone of things change as a more effective strategy to go toe-to-toe after Labor Day?
I think so. I mean, there are two things at play here. One, she's already the presumptive nominee. She is going to walk out of the DNC as the nominee. And beyond that, I think that we're also going to see Donald Trump continue to implode. There is no way that he does not implode after all of the excitement of the DNC. We've seen it on Truth Social. We've seen some of the conversations he's had with press, if you can call it that. I don't even know what those things were. I think that he's going to continue to do that, and she's going to hit him hard. But in addition to that, he has also attacked some of the most protected, I think, citizens of our country when it comes to veterans. And many of those veterans and veterans organizations are also pushing back. Because she has Tim Walz on her campaign ticket, there are ways in which she can speak to that population that will really touch them. And I think that he is a secret weapon in many ways, and he will be utilized in those ads as well.
I think that's what's been so interesting, seeing all this energy from the Republicans targeting Tim Walz. And I think the reason you're seeing that is precisely because they do see him as a threat. He does represent a lot of the constituencies that the Republicans think are their constituencies. Veterans, you know, people from rural backgrounds. He speaks to that, and that is why you're seeing a lot of energy being put into trying to take him down.
What about the Midwest? I mean, asking for a Minnesotan here, but the idea of, you know, when J.D. Vance came out, the thought was the Rust Belt would be, you know, his ability to command that. You've got a Minnesota governor, you've got the Midwest, far outside the Beltway, which everyone always focuses on as if it's the only place in the United States of America. It's not. What does this do for those voters to focus on Walz?
Well, what I think it does is it, one, signals that both of these campaigns view kind of, we've long said that, you know, the suburban mom is the swing voter. This almost feels to me like they think suburban dads are the swing voter, that like your kind of Big Ten football watching dad is the crucial swing vote in this election, and both campaigns are going to make a play for him.
I mean, they called him coach like 30 times.
Yes, and reportedly that's going to be a big part of
yeah.
his strategy. But I do wonder if by putting, and look, Democrats have done this with J.D. Vance. They've spent a ton of time going after him on all of the things he's said in the past that they find to be off-putting. So there's been a lot of effort in going after these vice presidential candidates on both sides lately. But I wonder, to what extent is that taking your eye off the ball? Now, in the case of going after J.D. Vance, as you said, Lance, Trump's already very well defined. And I've been in some ways surprised to see the lack of the kind of like apocalyptic rhetoric. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. That type of message is not actually what Harris and her team have been delivering so far. It's been more of this like, he's weird type message. Instead, they've really been focusing more of the harsh stuff on J.D. Vance. But for the flip side of that, Harris is still undefined. Every minute you spend talking about Tim Walz is a minute you're not spending trying to define Kamala Harris. So I do think it's a little bit of an odd strategic choice to spend so much time going after.
Well, she's also not doing any, excuse me, she's also not doing any interviews. I mean, the idea, and I always think, what does this mean to define yourself? Obviously, politically, you want to be the person to make sure that you set the tone. But if you're not giving interviews, which I know has been a big issue for people, not giving interviews, maybe until even Labor Day, and you've got this opportunity at the convention, what happens? Does she take the same approach she has and just say, I'm going to focus on looking ahead, not so much on doomsday, and do it this way?
I think I understand the strategy that they're employing right now. I totally get it, and they're trying to buy more time and buy more time. I think what she's running up against is exactly what we talked about earlier. When you get to Labor Day and voters start paying attention, she simply doesn't have an option because I don't think voters are going to allow it. So she's going to have to answer questions. She's going to have to come out with more policy-centric ideas and say, where does she want to take the country? Because voters are going to demand it. To your point, Kristen, no one knows who she is. No one knows what she stands for. What they have to go on are what the Trump people are saying, which is she was the border czar. She controlled the border in this country. Her record as a senator from California, which was a very far-left voting record. That's right now what people have to go on. So post-Labor Day, she's going to have to take questions. She's going to have to get out there and talk about the issues.